Okay, thank you, Ayya, for leading us in meditation. And hello to a few more friends who are checking in. Hello to Drew, Jen, Sally, Victoria, Elaine, Michael, Jim, and Danilo, and Key. Welcome, everyone. Happy to see you joining in once again for more Dharma sessions. So tonight, Ayya Soma will be speaking on the topic of love without attachment. So this is one of her favorite subjects, and it's, well, lots of other people are happy that she's here talking about this subject. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Ayya Soma to talk about love without attachment. Please.
Thank you, Bhante. I'm not sure why Bhante thinks it's one of my favorite topics. But I don't mind talking about it, so maybe everything is my favorite topic. I'm not sure. So, where to start? I'll start by sharing actually a simile that I will borrow from Pierpaolo Pasolini, who is a famous writer that died several decades ago, before I was born, in Italy. And he's very actually well known in the US as a director, as a movie director, but actually he's more well known in Italy as a writer. And he used to be my favorite writer. Before I encountered the Buddhist teachings, and then the Dharma kind of pretty much replaced anything that I liked beforehand. But anyway, he wrote a lot of beautiful things, and one of his writings, which is actually just an essay, was when he went to India and he encountered this huge amount of poverty and suffering all over the subcontinent, and then started talking about Mother Teresa's efforts in India. And he created this analogy of how he shared this analogy that was very beautiful to my mind, of how she approached helping this endless pool of people suffering with the approach of just kind of trying to empty the ocean with a little cup, with a little tiny, actually he used the metaphor of the little thing that you use in order to sew. I know it in Italian, ditale. I don't know how you say it in English. A little safeguard that you put here. Anyway, little tiny cup. Thimble.
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 Thimble. Okay, yes. I will never remember that. Thank you, Bhante. Yeah, so trying to empty the ocean with a thimble. So patiently going at it over and over again. And she managed to help so many different people. So many people with a tireless, endless reservoir of compassion and love. So that brings, the reason why I'm bringing that sort of metaphor and example to the mind is because, to me, it is a perfect example of love without attachment that can be realized actually also outside of sort of a Buddhist context. Mother Teresa, pretty much everybody is aware of. I don't think she was a Buddhist practitioner, but she was definitely a Christian monastic. And she helped countless beings in India with this tireless approach. And I remember the first time I went to India, which was actually also the last. I should go back. But when I went there, I remember being overwhelmed with the amount of suffering that I saw because there were so many people there. And when I went there, at least things might have changed in the meanwhile a little bit. But there was an extreme poverty everywhere, and there was no sort of hope in the horizon for this extreme dire suffering to end. So then or to have any kind of solution. So then when I read that passage in Pier Paolo Pasolini, I remember thinking, wow, what a beautiful way of summarizing the compassion of someone who has done so much in that place so tirelessly. But at the same time, I had no idea how to cultivate that. So it seemed like something worthy to pursue, worthy to cultivate, but something that I was not quite ready to approach. I had no idea. I would get overwhelmed just by if I couldn't if I couldn't help someone who was suffering in a mild way next door to me, let alone someone like such a big pool of people. So there's lots of different, actually beautiful things that happen that are both encouraged and cultivated in the tradition that I not necessarily was raised with, but I was born into. So I was born in Italy, born and bred in Italy, and even though my parents weren't particularly Catholic or quite at all, they baptized me, and that's about it. Still, I was raised in a culture that was Catholic, and there was lots of great, really good, beautiful messages that sounded quite rational and quite admirable, such as love your neighbor like yourself. But my experience had always that sort of flavor of disconnection with the ideal of like, yes, I would love to, love my neighbor. Oh, yes, I really love my neighbor. And then I meet the neighbor. He's a little bit unpleasant. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And then there's the pleasant neighbor. And then I'm like, oh, yes, I really love that one. And then another one that is really unpleasant, very difficult to love. So there was this disconnect between the aspiration and the capability to actually follow through. And so I thought actually for most of my life that it was kind of an innate quality that people were born with. Some people were just born with this unconditional love, and I just happened to have a very conditional, unconditional love. So the awareness of the limitation was always there, but there was very little information on how to expand it. And since I did not have faith in God, the Christian path, or I lost faith in God very soon in my childhood, there was very little to rely on in order to nurture the unconditional love that I had. And it was only until the Buddhist teachings, and when I found the Buddhist teachings, that I found in this domain similar concepts that are presented in Christianity, but also with a very practical way of developing them. So not only does the Buddha give us a sort of idea of what we should be cultivating, but he also tells us how to do it, which has been an incredible, beautiful gift. And my understanding of this is, first of all, to come once again to look at our current situation, to assess the situation, and really understand how are we currently behaving and relating to people or creatures that we love. So we have here Stan, that you met previously that did his little cameo. And Stan, one of his nicknames is Ajahn Metta. And he's actually a remarkable teacher. I'm not sure if he intends to be a teacher, but he's definitely an incredible teacher. Incredible Ajahn. Why am I saying that? So it's so I actually have spent a lot of years with Stan way before my Buddhist practice. So I used to be the caretaker of the kitty since January 2013, and then once we started Buddhist Insights, lots of caretakers showed up. So now I'm sharing the responsibility with other beings, which is great. He's very happy about that. But anyway, when I started taking care of Stan, it was not the most pleasant of cats. So he was a rescue cat from the shelter, and had a lot of like temper problems and behavioral problems, and kind of sort of transformed my life into a kind of nightmare for the first couple of months. That even my friends who were like big animal lovers, they were kind of like, you should really like just bring him back to the shelter because this cat is crazy. He's driving you insane. And I was like, no, I can't. So I spent so much time caring, training him, being there for him. He also had some health issues. So I spent there like so much research, figuring out how to cure him. And pretty much every year, something new would pop up. So these days he has this new thing, which is he's had it for a while now, skin allergy. So it comes and goes. So it requires a lot of attention and care in order to really be, with him. And when it was the two of us, he would always be so obsessed with me and constantly come and purr and cuddle, and such a little cutie. And then as soon as another human being appeared in the room, it was like, what's your name again? Talk to my paw. And it's been so interesting because I still remember in my mind going like full of aversion for that and a resentment towards the cat, going like, ungrateful cat. I spent so much time doing all of these things for you, caring so much for you, and it takes you like that a second to forget me. So as I say, dogs give you unconditional love, and cats teach you unconditional love. Because then at a certain point, I had to, look at my situation and go like, how interesting that all of these emotions are coming up here. And how all my acts of kindness and generosity and caring, all the beautiful acts of love that I do for this creature, I think they are unconditional, but they actually have a sort of kind of price tag, not a monetary price tag per se, but a sort of emotional price tag with it. And so that made me reflect also in my relationships, obviously as a layperson, now as a monastic. We eliminated that from the things to worry about. But also in relationships, at a certain point, I was like, oh, it's very interesting. How am I dealing with relationships? So I ask you, how are you dealing with your relationships? With significant others, with your partners? And also, how are you dealing with your relationships with your family? I still deal with that as a monastic. So what is the situation like How are our actions conditioned by what we want back? Is there something that we want back? And if someone doesn't behave the way that we want them to behave, how do we feel? And this shouldn't bring any shame. It shouldn't be done like, oh, I'm a horrible person. Oh, I have all this jealousy, or I have all this like selfishness, or I have all of these whatever sort of mind states, but rather just like a diagnosis, like, oh, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. So what is wholesome and what is unwholesome? And kind of starting to look at it deeply. And if you're confused on the subject matter, also like the Buddha gives like very specific sort of guidelines on how to see if something is wholesome or something is unwholesome. So does it bring suffering, or does it not bring suffering? And you'll see that love, like really caring, doing something. Oh, may Stan be happy, may he be healthy. That brings happiness to the mind. But, oh, Stan prefers going to sit on Bante's lap instead of mine. That brings suffering to the mind. So it's very easy. We don't have to actually even ponder too much. We can just look at what the feeling of the sensation is like. What does the emotion feel like? And that gives us a direct, like specific guideline. And when we go to our, significant others, it's the same thing. So it always amused me like the first time I picked up like one of those dating apps. I think actually Tinder doesn't have that many, if I remember correctly, doesn't have that many options. But there are other like these sort of websites. I think Cupid. Thank you. I was like, okay, Kindle. That's not. That's something else. Maybe. Okay, Cupid. Okay, Cupid, Match.com, whatever they are. I'm not very much up to date these days, but it was quite interesting because, like, I remember opening it and seeing all these different filters and research boxes, and like it was like more elaborate than Amazon.com. And like it was seriously like how many how many different criterias for searching and categories, by race, by gender, by sexual preference, by books they read, by books they don't read, by sports they do, by places they've traveled, they have not traveled, a combination of all of these. So you might want someone who travels but doesn't do sports, but has been to Africa but does not go to Asia because you don't like to go to Asia, but has gone to Northern Europe, not Southern Europe, like whatever kind of sort of combination you can find it. And I remember thinking, wow, even though the sort of science is so kind of specific and precise, most of it then when it comes to reality, it's dukkha. It's like terrible. Oh, wow, on paper, it's like perfect combination of all of these interesting factors that the mind produced. Sure, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, like the whole endless list of what like the perfect partner should be like. Creative but not broke. That has a job but is not too self-obsessed. Like all of this, like kind of like perfect on paper, and then in reality, the experience of it like being like what, like shallow. So kind of really looking at that. And so this has been a reflection that has been very helpful actually with Buddhist practice, that eventually made me ordain was the realization that, especially when we get into relationships with significant others, it's very difficult to love in the first place, let alone to love without attachment. And that's because, for the most part, we come already with this whole endless list of requirements and expectations towards other people, rather than the question, oh, how can I actually be a kind person? How can I be a generous person? How can I be a loving person, a compassionate person to whoever I have next to me? So once again, it gives you a bit of an idea of the first two noble truths. First noble truth, there is suffering. This is how I'm creating the suffering, through desire, through craving, through endless craving, so many different ways. And the closer the relationship to the individual, the more sort of cravings and demands we have. But going back to what the Buddha says of, like, if there is something wholesome, does not lead to suffering, and something unwholesome leads to suffering, then we start by analyzing our experience. We start understanding what is worth cultivating and what is worth not cultivating. And here, the metaphor of gardening, for example, is something that is very pertinent and useful. So if you have no idea how to garden, then most likely you're going to water everything. Both the vegetables, both the flowers and the weeds. And sometimes you're going to uproot the flowers and the vegetables and let the weed grow, who will strangle the rest of the vegetables and the rest of the flowers. But just as in gardening, in order to actually be capable of growing food, growing flowers, growing anything, you have to learn, observe, be capable of distinguishing the plants, and then learning how to pick out the plants. You also start learning which plants are companion plants that help grow one another. There's so many, like, actually really beautiful analogies with gardening and in our emotional sort of landscape and how to navigate it. So in the same way, you start learning this is to be cultivated, this is not to be cultivated. This is to be picked away, thrown away, uprooted. This is to be nourished, grown, fortified. And we do that by cultivating the wholesome mind states. So we didn't do it tonight, metta meditation, because I have a headache and I felt like I needed to to just tranquilize the mind. So I offered a bit of a different meditation than the metta meditation. But metta meditation is extremely helpful to really get in touch with how beautiful and how incredible a mind imbued with these traits is, with this wholesome mind state is, and really developing the wish for everyone to be happy, but by starting with the people and the beings that are in your immediate sphere. So really thinking every morning, not every morning, but yes, every morning, every day, every moment actually, wishing for all the beings around you to be happy, peaceful, and safe. And also rejoicing in whatever goodness they are experiencing. So if Stan right now is sitting on Jen's lap and he's seems to be having the time of his life, instead of thinking, oh, I really want Stan to be with me, going, oh, I'm so happy that Stan is having a good time with Jen. He really loves Jen. And I'm so happy that Jen is having a good time with Stan. That's so lovely. That's great. May they both be happy. May they both be healthy. May they both be safe. So it's both mudita and metta. And compassion, always, always looking for a way to help release the suffering of all the beings that are around you. And understanding that the suffering is a universal condition that we're all experiencing to one degree or another. So pretty much when we reflect in our whether or not we're capable of loving, or drawbacks in loving, we all have a sort of similar experience, just different shades of the same thing. And then developing equanimity. So a strong, stable mind that then will allow us actually, to love without attachments. So to have really an unconditional love. And I'll end with this quote from the Samyutta Nikaya 10.2, where the Buddha says, "It's unworthy for a wise person to not think of the other with compassion. If you instruct others with a mind clear and confident, your compassion and empathy don't create attachments." When I read that, it was so beautiful. So I had it on my computer because I had saved it a while back. So beautiful. If you instruct others with a mind clear and confident, your compassion and empathy don't create attachments. So you can never say anything else after the Buddha. So that's all I have to share.
Thank you, Ayya, for that wonderful talk. So at this time, if anyone has any more questions, you can go ahead and type them in the live chat. I'll go ahead and start going through the questions, starting at the top. So first off, there's an off-topic question about how to tell what kinds of chocolate are allowable in the evening. There's stuff about the topic later on. Do you want me to answer? Do you want to handle this one on chocolate or save it for month?
Sure, you're the chocolate expert.
Okay, so first off, so Sally was asking about ginger, candies, and dark chocolate. First off, ginger candy is allowable. So it's a mixture of ginger, which is medicine, and sugar, which is specifically allowed. You asked about dark chocolate percentage. Any percentage is okay. The important thing is that dark chocolate should not contain any kind of milk or fruits or nuts. But the other ingredients you list, like cocoa butter, sunflower lecithin, soy lecithin, vanilla extract, stevia extracts, those are all fine. Those are all considered medicines. So most of those ordinary food additives are acceptable. Then there's some questions more closely related to the topic. Yuri Tsai asks, can we talk about the meaning of love in Buddhism and what the Buddha thought? Do monastics truly love another, or do they suppress those feelings?
So what we're actually trying to develop in Buddhism is incredibly high standards. So we've just spoken about how difficult it is to just love truly, purely, even a cat, like just a pet through which we have very little conflictual sort of relationships with. Then it gets increasingly difficult with a partner, etc. So in Buddhism, actually, what we're trying to do is develop the highest of all of these qualities, which is metta, unconditional love for every single being, regardless of whether we like them, we find them interesting, or they have our same likes and dislikes that we have. If we have, they like the same books that we like, or they like the same sports that we like, or that they have the sense of humor that we like, or they come from the same country that we come from. Like, we have so many different ways and criteria to relate to people. So monastic life, it's not the reason why we are celibate. It's not to repress feelings, but rather to simplify things. So instead of actually creating extra complications, which, by the way, normally sexual relationships add that extra layer of complication, but you don't even need to go to necessarily like sexual relationships to have a complicated relationship with someone to begin with, as we see whenever we relate to our family members, for example. I love my mom, but I would say that the relationship with my mom is not always that easy. It's quite complicated. So it's extending. So we want to cultivate all the wholesome qualities, all the love, without the attachments, intentionally, but manifest it to everyone, every single being, no one excluded. No one excluded. Very lofty goal. But we're working on it.
And Sally asks, how to develop unconditional love towards oneself? I feel it's harder to love myself unconditionally, maybe due to self-expectation, demanding, craving, then leads to self-judgment.
Yeah. Well, actually, thanks for bringing that up. So that is one of the main things, that it's a sort of kind of saying, but very true. That if you don't love yourself, it's very difficult that you'll be able to love others. So that's why it's very important to actually, if not start with metta for yourself, at least include yourself to one shape or degree or another. So in Buddhism, it's not may everybody be happy except for myself, but may everyone be happy, including myself. So yeah, I would recommend patience, what we were talking about the other day. So really coming to that sort of acceptance of your defilements, while still keeping, goals, pursuing goals, but being totally okay to fail. Like, just start with the idea that you were already unsuccessful with whatever goal you have. That's what I normally find helpful. Go like, okay, well, I'm going to start this new thing. It's going to be terrible, or it's not going to succeed. It's fine. So I take 2 moments and go like, okay, I'm equanimous. And then I pursue it and I do my best in order to make it happen. But if it doesn't happen, then I'm totally okay with it, because I already have developed the sort of equanimity in not getting what I want. So then the work becomes the goal becomes the process rather than the goal itself, if it makes sense.
And Jim asks, in metta meditation, are the intentions/phrases the metta, or are the resultant feelings the metta?
My understanding is that you want to generate the feeling of metta. So everything else, it's sort of a useful, how do you call it? No, I can't speak English anymore. Springs to propel you to generate the feeling. So kind of like evocative images, evocative concepts that make you generate metta rather than being the actual metta itself. So in fact, what it's recommended is to normally start by saying whatever kind of words or recollecting whatever kind of images or people that bring sort of the feeling of metta. And then once the metta is really strong, the feeling of metta is really strong, you abandon all of that. You don't need any words, you don't need any concepts, you don't need any images to support it. You just stay there with a mind imbued of loving kindness. So you don't need anymore to wish for everyone to be happy. You're already feeling that it's already there, like it's embedded in that loving, beautiful mind state of metta, very blissful mind state.
Okay, then Yuri Tsai makes a comment which you might want to address. She said, at the end of the day, emotions, which includes love, are simply biochemical reactions in the body.
Yuri, I wasn't expecting this from you, a scientific materialist comment. Yes, of course. There is also an effect. Everything is psychosomatic. But the Buddhist point of view is not that our emotions are the product of whatever that is. This
biochemical reactions.
Biochemical reactions. Thank you for the English. So it's not that the biochemical reactions produce the emotions, but it's rather the other way around. It's the mind. The mind is at the forefront of everything. So yeah, we tend to be very obsessed with anything that is material. So with our body, and that's what Western science normally does, is looking for all the answers in the brain. But I encourage you to actually practice the Huatou meditation of where do you think your mind is? So it was very revealing to me when actually I was made aware that if you ask the average Westerner where the mind is, we will all point here. And if you ask the average person from Asia where they think the mind is, they point here. They point to the heart. It was mind-blowing. Just something like that was mind-blowing in my practice, because it was never something that I had ever had a doubt or questioned. And there are these beautiful meditation practices in, once again, Huatou, in Chan Buddhism, in Chinese Mahayana, and also in Tibetan Buddhism. So all the Mahamudra practices, I personally adore them. So they're all Vipassana practices to actually really start dismantling our delusion, of all our preconceived ideas that we don't question in regards to the mind. What color is the mind? Is the mind inside or outside of you? When I was first asked that question, I was like, oh, wow. I never thought that my mind could be outside of this body. But actually, right now, my experience of the world is way beyond my physical body. My physical body and my experience of the world. So could my mind be there? Why not? It's just as arbitrary as my mind being here, or my mind being here, or my mind being in my foot. My mind being black, my mind being red, my mind being green, polka dot. Or do I even think it's supposed to have a unified color? So there are so many interesting questions that we can use in meditation practice that are aimed at destroying our preconceived ideas that we think are so solid, that we think are truth, but in reality are just the causes and conditions, or the product of causes and conditions, namely the sort of culture and ideas and belief systems that are currently present right now. And of course, our past karma.
Sally asks, which sutta is it for the quote?
Samyutta Nikaya 10.2.
Mm, Gabriella asks, in the case of loving without attachment, what is the best way to relinquish toxicity or improve problematic relationship with parents, siblings, or other family members?
Can you repeat it again? Sorry.
In the case of loving without attachment, what is the best way to relinquish toxicity or improve problematic relationships with parents, siblings, or other family members?
Well, loving without wishing for that to be the result. It's very difficult, but that's the only thing that has actually happened that I have found success with so far. So the relationship with my parents has never been terribly easy, especially since I put robes on. It's been a little bit problematic, but interestingly enough, lately actually we have a pretty decent relationship. The crisis has put us kind of like in a good, harmonious, probably temporary relationship. But it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't just the virus. All of a sudden, we have become somewhat awakened in this domain, but rather it has come personally from fully understanding these teachings and stopping the whole wanting for my parents to be different, stopping for my parents to act in a different way, like basically letting go of all the expectations that I had on my parents. So even though they never let go of their expectations, which is why I thought it was necessary for me to also kind of hold on to my expectations, I was like, okay, well, whatever. They have these habits of conduct towards me. They have these, once again, expectations. How about I just practice equanimity, loving kindness, mudita, compassion? And that's the only job I need to take each time I speak with them. Of course, then there are certain limits. So if at a certain point the relationship becomes very abusive, especially physically abusive, if it's physically abusive, then you should remove yourself from the situation. If it's not physically abusive, but it's just verbally abusive, then you also need to kind of understand what is your sort of threshold. What is your sort of boundary and limit? And not coming from an emotional or ideological state, but really look at your experience and go, okay, well, right now this is really damaging my mind. So it means I should remove myself from the situation and build up my mental strength. And then I will have different conditions in order to be able to deal with the situation skillfully. Because if you don't have that mental strength developed, then you risk damaging yourself and not being of benefit for others. So then the toxicity becomes increased exponentially. So always watching your mind and practicing Dharma, taking it as an opportunity to practice Dharma, but also understanding your limitations. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay. And Gabriella asks, what should we do when kindness and friendship is used as a pretense to take advantage of you?
Same thing. So understanding your boundaries and also being wise. So if you actually understand that someone is trying to take advantage of you, you actually want to practice compassion and not create the conditions for them to make bad karma. So it's not that by becoming a doormat and allowing people to do whatever they want with you, you're actually being kind. But rather, it's having an appropriate response in every single situation. So if someone is unskillful and going about, their defilements and trying to make unskillful acts, then the appropriate response is not like, oh yeah, do whatever you want, I'm Buddhist, peace and love, yeah, walk on me, yeah, it's okay, spit on me, yeah, it's fine. No, you just go, okay, well, thanks, but no thanks. So there's the usual very famous simile that the Buddha uses that goes like, if I come to you and I bring you a gift and you don't accept the gift, does the gift belong to me or does the gift belong to you? So the gift still belongs to me because you haven't accepted it. So in the same way, whenever someone is coming with unskillful mind states or less than optimal intentions, then you don't accept for that to move forward.
She also asks, if someone asks you forgiveness for a wrong action, but dismisses your feelings or request for it to not be done again, and the person repeats the same action constantly, is it wrong to consider their apology as insincere and thus not valid?
So that's where deep listening comes very handy. So I recommend watching again Bante's Dhamma talk from the other night, and then that's a session for not just continuing the whole thing, that the whole sick pattern of like someone behaving unskillfully, then apologizing, then behaving unskillfully again, then apologizing, but really going through it and going, okay, now let's sit down, really listen to my point of view, and I will be listening to your point of view, structure it properly, and come to a sort of resolution. Sometimes, by doing that technique so far, my experience has been pretty successful. We're still running this organization. So Bhante and I have found a lot of help in really listening to one another. But I'm sure that, perhaps with other people, sometimes there might be the case that things cannot be solved. And in that situation, you have to really contemplate critically. Is this relationship, is this situation really affecting my mind, in which I am generating unwholesome mind states? And if so, then I need to remove myself from it. But always keeping a mind of loving kindness and accepting the forgiveness from the other, the apologies. So really forgiving the other person. Because it's not that the other person is bad or there's anything wrong with them. It's their defilements that are getting them to act unskillfully. So there's nothing that you can do about their defilements. They can do something about their defilements, but they have to, learn how to deal with it. And you also have to protect your mind because you're also unenlightened. We're all unenlightened. Until we become awakened, we have to understand what we're ready. Pushing, always obviously are expanding our metta. But you can see it also in meditation practice. Even though you understand the theory, you can't do it straight away. You have to understand. You have to increase the metta. It doesn't goes like that when you are a very developed practitioner. So just see what is your situation and then act in accordance to your situation.
Andre says, hello, Ayya. Is it true that at the stage of anagami, all physical desire is gone?
That is a question for Bante.
The answer is yes.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, because sometimes I feel a little bit, since I'm still a student of the path, I feel a little bit uncomfortable answering certain questions because it's very bad karma to get it wrong, and then I mislead you.
Then there's a few comments from Yudi. They're not phrased as questions, though, so we can...
Okay.
Victor asks, how about attachment from previous karma, like soulmate?
What about it?
Okay. Danilo says...
I will just say about that, of attachment from previous soulmates, that according to my understanding of karma, that is totally, absolutely unfeasible, that you have certain people that you've encountered over and over again in previous lifetimes. So then, together with the wholesome patterns, you also have the unwholesome patterns. So take it as an opportunity to actually break the pattern of the unwholesome and perhaps pursue the pattern of the wholesome. So right now you have the teachings of the Buddha to help you guide with the relationship. So what we're trying to do is end the cycle, not perpetuate the cycle.
Danilo says, my friend has been emotionally abused, but she only realized that her parents damage her mind frequently. Is her seeking help the right choice for herself?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we also have to be very humble, in our practice, and really never be humble and ask for help. Like, not be arrogant and think, oh yes, I can do it all by myself. No, that is difficult. Being a human is difficult. Dealing with suffering is difficult. So don't be afraid to ask for help, especially if you're dealing with a really bad situation. If there is abuse, there are lots of people that can help you dealing with the abuse, and one shouldn't be shy. There shouldn't be any type of sort of concern in approaching specialists or friends or people who can help, but seeking that.
Okay, and
Stan is making his appearance.
Marielle says, can we have unconditional love for another if we don't have it for ourselves? Wouldn't that be taking from an empty tank? I think you answered that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sally says, in the past, I thought the increase of love might lead to clinging to this world. Like love towards family members might strengthen the link with this world, then lessen liberation will.
Once again, depends on what you're watering. If you're watering both the tomatoes and the weeds, then ultimately the weeds are going to suffocate the tomatoes. But if you actually skillfully only water the tomatoes, then it's a great opportunity to actually develop wholesome mind states that propel you towards awakening. So repressing and avoiding relationships and emotions is not the way towards awakening. That is what actually impedes your path towards awakening. But you have to do it skillfully, and once again, learning and following the Buddhist teachings.
Gabriella asks, I struggle with trying to keep my metta from getting stained with sentimentality, which is a near enemy of compassion. What do you recommend to prevent compassion from becoming commiseration?
So it seems like you're not practicing metta, but you're practicing commiseration. So I think we were talking about that during monk chat. So really watching your mind and seeing how am I actually, for example, bringing up the metta. So what am I bringing up to the mind in order to generate metta? And sometimes if you start picking situations or people or animals, for example, even though you really truly love someone, but this person is currently sick at the hospital with coronavirus, then of course there will be a lot of grief and a lot of other emotions that will come up in the metta meditation. So perhaps that's not the right person to bring up in this moment. So you want to generate a metta that is pure. So pure loving kindness. So you have to see with yourself. I don't have the answer on how you have to do it. You have to actually develop the capability of really watching your mind and noticing cause and consequence. So see, whenever I bring up this person in my mind, this feeling arises. If I bring up this other person in my mind, this feeling arises. If I start shifting my mind, thinking about the fact that I don't want them to die, then my mind goes towards this other direction. So then okay, so I shouldn't shift my mind in that direction. And probably it's best if I contemplate Stan instead of my mother, Stan the cat, instead of my mother, right? My mother, if I contemplate her, then I start thinking, oh, but she's old, she might be dying soon. That doesn't bring me, that impedes generating metta. But Stan, I just have a pure loving feeling, loving kindness towards him. So it's easier to boost it up.
And then Danila says, I do feel like I love the average person I meet, but in a different way than I love the person who is close to me. As a layperson, can I love a significant other if it is mutual and wholesome?
Yes, of course. No, you're meant to start with who is easy. Don't go to the difficult, to the enemy. So there's the ideal, that's the sort of end result, to generate a loving kindness, whether you're a monastic and a lay person. So it's not that the Buddha was like, wait, only if you have robes on, you should develop metta. Everybody should be developing metta. And for every single person, no one excluded. But obviously, we have to start somewhere. So start skillfully with someone that you already have an affinity with, an inclination towards. So I start with Stan instead of cockroaches. I'm not particularly fond of cockroaches. It's very difficult for me to, to have a mind of loving kindness for cockroaches. But I've been practicing non-harming cockroaches. And that has helped incredibly my metta overall. So non-harming then creates the conditions for compassion to arise, for metta to expand and to become fully comprehensive. Before my Buddhist practice, if I wouldn't kill cockroaches myself, I would tell people to kill cockroaches. Disgusting, poor, horrible beings in my mind. So you don't want to, if I had started my Buddhist practice trying to produce metta with the cockroaches, good luck with that. I would have quit after a week because I wouldn't have had any sort of progress with my Buddhist practice. But I started with what was easy. So I started purifying my metta, for example, with for Stan. So actually, I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh that was describing how there is this beautiful way of relating between husband and wife in in Vietnam, at least in the traditional way, where they would relate to each other like every day. They would treat each other like they were kind of strangers, like they had met each other for the first time. So when you think with your partner, when you had met them the first time, you're probably like very careful and like trying to see, oh, what is their favorite food, or what do they like, and how can I make them more comfortable. But then as time goes by, we become very distracted and we start taking things for granted, and that's when we stop watering the plants, and we're kind of like watering everything, if not actually not watering anything, and then everything dries out and dies out, and then that's the end of the relationship. So the reason why he was bringing that up was that that way I thought it was really beautiful and very poetic, looking at your partner like it was the first time you were going on a date with them. So sweet to kind of generate that every single day. So treasuring every single day like it was the first day. Beautiful.
Gabriela asks, is there a way to measure the progress of metta practice?
Yes, you'll see. Your mind experience. So we don't have weights. There's no certificate. Metta level 2, metta level 3. No, you'll just see it. It will also be directly proportionate to your happiness. So the more metta you're capable of developing, the happier you'll become.
So Sally asks, may I ask, and this is the last question. Sally asks, may I ask why Ayya said avoiding relationship love can delay the path towards enlightenment? Did you say that?
No. What I said was, so there are things that one needs to develop by avoidance, and there's other things that one needs to develop by developing. So we will be going through that with Bhante Sudaso in the Sabasava Sutta during Sutta study. That I believe that the first session is tomorrow morning, so you're got very good karma, and then the second part will be on Thursday morning. So very good teachings.
Okay, one more question. Marielle just asked, can we start the metta practice with plants and slowly grow it into other beings like humans?
I don't think so. So unless Bhante thinks otherwise, my instinctive answer should be that it should be a living being. But I don't know. Maybe if it works for you, try it out. How about you try it out, and then instead of like me giving you an answer, you report back. So try it out, because maybe you have a different relationships to plants than I do. So for me, it's a little bit. I mean, I like plants, but if they die, I also don't care. So it's yeah. You might have a little bit of a different relationship with plants, and I think we had in the past a conversation on that, if I recall. So it might be something that you want to try out, and then we can have a conversation on it once you see if you're successful at it or not.
So Danilo asks, do you mean sentient being? I assume she means, like, are you saying to do metta for sentient beings?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's the last question. So thank you all for joining in for another lovely Dharma session. And thank you, Ayya Soma, for leading the meditation and the talk and the discussion. So may we all swiftly attain awakening, as Sally is suggesting. So I think that's a great suggestion. And may everyone be happy and healthy and safe. And may we see you all at 8 o'clock in the morning. Good night, friends.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.